Oh, Salve, Albertville. Welcome back to the election breakdown. Compilation video, actually. Now, I am and have been your host, James Tyler Epperson. Today, I will correct any errors I've made in the mayor's video and address some updates and broader issues and policies that they are working on. Now, first up, Justin. Now, his slogan isn't MAG or MAGA as in make Albertville great again. It's actually it's time, referring to the term limits that he believes all politicians should follow, even on the city level. Now, MAGA is still associated with him by his followers, as many of them are, well, more conservative and the red camp. But he himself hasn't actually endorsed that, though many still associate that phrase with him. Now, another error I made about him is saying he was in real estate. He actually is not. He's in construction. Now, many people out there confuse the two, as they both relate to, well, creating housing and stuff, but with real estate, that's more property ownership and selling that, while construction doesn't even always relate to housing. It relates to building things up, repairing, and also demolition on occasion. Now, one last thing for Justin, and this is the longer one. Justin has he's released a in-depth look at his policy as far as ordinances and real estate. Now, he's released that on Facebook and a few other sources you can easily look at. I won't cover the entire thing, but to summarize, he wants to address the high cost of living in Albertville, high rent prices versus all low income, and or the low income of the individual families, and then also the ordinances, mainly the conditions people are forced to live in rather than some of the stuff Miss Callahan is interested in, and more of like the look of the town and like pollution and such, though he is also concerned about that. Now, his main tool in addressing this situation will be condemning down houses that shouldn't be holding occupants and are unsafe for tenants, while also encouraging the buildup of more apartments and larger family homes to suit possibly multiple families or extended families. I also have a few other opinions and policies on that, which I will make my own video about. Though many people in the real estate business also have concerns, though they still, just about all of them, accept that, people are being, exploited by this system. Though it's also not the realtor's fault entirely, as they have to make a profit and they're just trying to provide a service that is greatly needed, as here the demand far outreaches, the supply. Now, throughout the nation, there's a housing issue. There are thousands, millions of people who are homeless, in poor conditions, or on the verge of losing their homes due to high pricing. Now, throughout the country, mainly the issue is larger real estate companies looking more for profit rather than providing their services out of the goodness of their heart, as, they have to make capital. So there are plenty of faking and buildings and such out there and just unused land. Though all that is in the private sector, and the only real way to fix that issue would be to crack down on them with some antitrust laws. But here, Here, the issue is definitely more of like the natural buildup of supply and demand. We built up so many very small, single family, one story homes with large yards, and that doesn't leave much space left over for more building. Now, um, also with these smaller homes, they are real. A lot of them are really old and are well decaying, falling apart. Some still have asbestos in their walls and ceilings, and well, many others are just old vine wood, decaying brick that's crumbling away, and have been lived in so long by people who are being stretched for so much that they don't have time to fully maintain their homes and properties just so they can make rent. And if they can't make rent, there's list and list of hundreds of people who will happily pay as high of a rate that the renters want. But how do you actually address this issue is the main thing. It's one thing to identify the problem, right? Which thankfully they've actually addressed the problem right, unlike with many issues in federal politics. Now they have to figure out how is the best way to implement the solution. You have to balance the needs of the property owners and the needs of the tenants. And the third party, which is the community overall. As well, if you just punish the realtors, they're going to stop investing, they're not going to be able to make a profit, and they're going to go bankrupt. And then you don't have realtors and private owners wanting to come into Albertville, and it's just all either the big major corporations, no one, or the city owning everything. Now, the other option, or the other extreme, is, well, you continue to appeal the realtors and stuff and suit their needs, but if you do that too much, you, well, don't solve the issue, because, you're trying to tiptoe your way through sorry, I guess the better explanation is, you're trying to slowly tiptoe through a forest full of crunchy leaves and sticks, so not to wake the guard dogs. But really, you may want to just start running through it. Because if you do this too slowly and too appealing, well, you're not going to be able to serve the tenants at all. The poor or class families who need this, well, they're not going to actually get anything. You have to find a middle ground. You have to do this policy slowly and sustainably and responsibly with a lot of thought. And, well, any real mistake could cause consequences for several other administrations down the line, and possibly lose people millions or lose people lives. Personally, I prefer losing the millions of dollars over lives, but at the end of the day, they probably end up just being the same. Now, personally, I, well, am hopeful about the situation. We have to worry about how the policies backfiring, but as long as we tiptoe through this carefully, all come together and work as a community to solve the issue, and survive, we should get through this. Likely the situation will have to get worse before it gets better, but, we can build this. Now, on to the incumbents, and mainly Honey. Now, with Honey, the one thing I really left out is what situation the town was in when these incumbents came into office for the first time. And that was 2011. Anyone who was in Albertville at that time, you know what that year meant. Specifically, one day. One day when our nice skies, which usually only bring us occasional uh, mischief at worst, and usually just joys of rain, sunshine, and pretty easy um, fluctuating weather as Alabama. And that one day, every 100 years or so, when our skies decide it's time for us to wipe everything out again and start over like a biblical plague, and then they come in, those tornadoes, and wipe everything out. Now, my own family, I was only about 5 when this all happened, but I still remember a lot of it very vividly. I was pretty sheltered and actually look back on the time with a bit of nostalgia as my family did basically everything possible to protect and shelter me from the situation, but looking back on it, I still see it was the apocalypse to many people. We had to sleep in a bathroom over there that's in the center of our house, safest place there, for several days, wearing bike helmets both at night and part of the day, in case anything would fall on us. Not just the day before, the day of, and the day after, but even a week after, as I guess it just made us all feel safe, all cuddled together. And, you know, just in case they came back. Thankfully they didn't. The power was out for a week. Not sure how long the wall was out, but I know it was out. And so we couldn't use the kitchen, so we made pancakes on the grill. We went to, I think, Foodland once to pick up a few extra groceries, get some new stuff that our fridge had ruined as it was out. The lights were out there. Some birds had gotten in since the doors had been open or unable to close, so they were just flying around the ceiling as people looked and gawked at them. Occasionally they tried to get the lights back on and flicker. Thankfully the fridges were still working, but the town overall, everything was a mess. Many tree limbs crashed down. I think my sister actually recorded a little footage of one of the trees in my neighbor's front yard snapping off, and it just looked like a spear until eventually they decided to cut that tree down many years later. And then, you know, power lines were down. You couldn't really travel safely for a day or two. But the community came together. Eventually, we found that hope. Well, no one else did. And we came together. And in that time, we elected new leaders to pull us through and get things done. This is where our kind Councilman and Mayor Honey began to get elected. And they rebuilt the town. They didn't just restore it to its former status quo. No. They lifted it up higher than it had ever been. They brought us more revenue. They brought us more population. They developed us more. They paved more roads than any administrations had done before. And they served well. They were pretty hands-on, as was needed at the time. And, well, they served for a very long time. But they served well. They did their jobs. You have to give them at least that. You may still, like Ennis, believe it's time for them to go. Time for them to step down and let some new generation go in. But they still served us faithfully. And their terms will likely soon be ending before too long. But as their generation passes, let us all remember that they were heroes. They and the people they led rebuilt this town and made it something to be proud of. And the generations that follow them, that come in, will continue on carrying that torch into brighter days, making us all proud to be Aggies. Now, that is it for this election compilation. Now, I will be making a video for the councilman next, and a kind of breakdown of my own personal ideas and policies, some suggestions for the candidates, and later on, for how we should further the fellow ballot bill and address the ordinance situations. But until then, thank you all for watching. I am James Tyler Epperson, and you've been watching the election breakdown on Ideal Trazio.